Revolution of common sense.
Revolution of common sense.
A revolution of common sense.
Truth was once common sense, but today, truth is uncommon. Explore biblical truths around faith, business, and politics with Peter Demas. Uncommon sense in current times.
Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. I'm excited to be joined by filmmaker and author Greg Rabidoux as the co-founder of Valmar Films and the author of The Insatiable Dragon, How China Took Control of Hollywood. Greg brings both a Christian and an insider perspective on what's going wrong in Hollywood and how believers should respond. It's interesting because I became a Christian late in life. And one of the things that when I was like watching Hollywood movies with my kids, particularly for my youth, I would think, oh, these movies are fine because I watched them around that time period. One of them in particular, we were watching the movie Major League. And, I was watching it with my kids and realized we can't watch this with them. And I watched it around the same age. And I did not realize, like, even back then, some of the messaging that was taking place at that point in time. So I'm real excited to have you on the show, Greg. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to be here.
So how do you think we should respond as Christians or even just really strong people who have strong conservative values to modern Hollywood films? Where do you think we should be on that?
Yeah, so there's I think the conceptual, like how we should think about it, maybe react to it. And then the practical is always with any product, as you know, is just don't go to the stuff that you find offensive or seems to almost intentionally want to mock or make fun of your values, your beliefs, and how you've chosen to live your life and more than likely raise your family. That would be number one. Number two, I think how we should look at it is that Hollywood is a business, first and foremost. Now, it's been dominated by folks that have not been very sympathetic or even reasonable to Christianity over the years with many films and over the many decades. But it is a business. And the way the industry is right now, it has some what I'd call democratization of film. And because of technology, because of streaming, because of so many platforms, there is a strong opportunity for films that are faith-based, I think, that have as much now chance to succeed and be sustained success than ever before. So it's exciting in some ways, frustrating in others with some of the big tent films that keep doing the same thing they always do. But this weekend, the Chosen franchise, Last Supper, #3 film in the country, actually almost beating Snow White at a fraction of the cost, and A Working Man with Jason Statham, #1. But that's exciting to me when you take a 270 plus budget, Snow White, and you lose, right now they're on pace to lose about 150 million. You take The Chosen, which is about 1/12 of that budget, and it almost beats it in the box office this past weekend. That sends a clear message, I think.
All right. So I guess I'm kind of curious because you say it's a business, but we see particularly you take Disney franchise because you brought up Snow White, and we'll take we'll assume that they did not realize like how crazy Ziegler was in that. I mean, the stuff she'll say. But nevertheless, Disney has been making some really terrible decisions and choices while targeting families but not being supported. If I were in the business field, even if I said, okay, look, I disagree with conservative Christians, but I recognize too that I still have to have family values in order to appeal to families. Right. But it doesn't seem like they're doing that from a business perspective. Why do you think that's the case?
So just because something's a business, as you know, doesn't mean everybody in it is practicing good business.
Okay.
What you just said is smarter business perspective than what Disney's been doing for a number of years, quite frankly. It happens when you stray too far from what made you successful. And it also happens when you start listening to a very, 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 increasingly smaller circle of people that are loud, that are active, that have a certain political agenda. They have a narrative they want to push, and you do two things. One, start and you keep hiring too many of the same like-minded people, and then you start listening to them almost exclusively, and you make your business decisions on that, and you forget about the audience that is not hungry for the product you're putting out. So you're basically putting out products for maybe 2 to 7% of your audience. And you mentioned the Rachel Zegler. Then when you got a co-star that's tweeting stuff about F Trump and may harm befall him and his supporters, and may they know no peace and a free Palestine and Hamas, right as the film's launching, you almost guarantee that 50-55% of your audience isn't even going to bother. Although they were intrigued by the title, they're not even going to bother to show up now.
So when you're talking about, even again what Rachel talked about, like, the pro-Palestinian movement and pro-Hamas, but then her co-star is Gal Gadot, who is very strong pro-Israeli. She is very very outspoken about it. Why is it that doesn't seem to be, because that can also arguably alienate the other 50% of people, but she didn't seem to get the limelight of being the problem for this movie as she did, as Rachel Zegler did. So how do you mesh that of people's and their actors' personal political views that creates problems, versus in this particular situation where, or like with Gal Gadot's situation, it's not a problem, where with Rachel's it was? Like, how does that play out? How does that work in Hollywood?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. A number of years ago, I wrote a book called Hollywood Politicos Then and Now. And I tackled that subject. And then in the book you mentioned, Insatiable Dragon, I kind of came back to it. So Gal Gadot, before Snow White, was a very known commodity with all the Wonder Woman hype and huge success of Wonder Woman. So the media had already kind of followed and covered the fact of her background. Israeli born, served in the Israeli armed forces, very outspoken in support of Israel and against anti-Semitism. So it wasn't seen as a news story.
Right.
Rachel Zegler, she was the hot property. She was sort of the it girl coming out of West Side Story reboot. But a lot of the mainstream folks, audience goers, didn't really know a lot about her still. So when she comes blasting out against Trump, and as well as anybody, if you wanted to, at least in the past, get known fast, get the support of mainstream media, say how much you hate Trump and his supporters. So she did that. So she was not as known a commodity. And so that was picked up by a lot of the outlets that ordinarily would have maybe done a little bit more of a balance. And she was the star. I mean, she's Snow White.
Right.
So Gal Gadot, bigger star, but not the lead in the film. So traditionally, the lead is going to get more natural media coverage as well.
But Disney has also had a history of just overplaying their hand with a lot of things. I mean, I can remember, was it John Carter from Mars, or John Carter that like bombed like $200 million? The Lone Ranger, which should have done well. It had great actors in it. Had the story that ties in with people's childhood. Plus, you had the kid stuff of it, but it also bombed completely. We see that Disney's not immune from it. It didn't raise the level of Ishtar from the 80s, but it still had, I mean, but you know what I'm saying? But it seems like recently, because they're trying to create this political undercurrent that's not even really an undercurrent anymore. It seems like it's on top of the waves. It seems to be a difference. So, like, how again do we distinguish Disney from just saying, "Oh, well, that's just a bad decision. Like, we just went over budget. We called it the wrong title, like those others," versus, "Hey, maybe we should stop saying this stuff and start making, and hold true to what the movie is really about."
Yeah, no, it's an interesting perspective. I think in the Disney case, to your point, they've had a number of failures. And it's important when you do sort of the dissection of it, or you do the autopsy of why a film didn't work, there's always more than one factor. So with Disney, I mean, there's seven dwarfs to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I can think of at least quick seven reasons why this movie's not doing nearly as well as it should, right? A bad script. They took what worked in Snow White 1937 and they tweaked it so much to try to be progressive that it lost a lot of what made it strong. Bad karma, bad lead star, bad media, bad press, bad timing, and there's, I'm sure, another seventh dwarf that I missed. So early on as well, some of the decisions that they made intentionally put them on a wrong track. So initially they were going to go with live human dwarfs. And they had sort of a rainbow of transgender, gay, lesbian dwarfs. And so clearly they're sending a very strong message, right? Well, that got such backlash, they decided to go with CGI computer generated dwarfs. Then people were like, what? I mean, Peter Dinklage, who is
Right.
an actor in dwarf, Game of Thrones, said, what in the world is Disney doing? They don't need to make a remake. And if they're doing it, why are they cutting out one of the few opportunities for people like me? So then they went back to live and then they ended up CGI generated. So that, when you dissect it, is a clear just bad decision from the start that got some bad press. But when you look at their other films and why they weren't making it, I would submit that, again, they're listening to too small a percentage that are maybe the loudest and the most active, and they're making films that please them internally, their own culture. And then when they send it out there, it bombs. I mean, Mulan, great example. Mulan was a big time $280 million budget. It lost well over 200 million. And in large part because just the decision to go from animated, magic, make believe, cute, you know, appeal to a certain audience, and live action, it suddenly became frightening. And then the whole Xinjiang province and Uyghur controversy, and Disney sort of just wanted to sidestep that. Got a lot of people wondering, does Disney have a moral compass at all? I mean, do they have any moral compass left, or have they totally lost, again, what made them so successful over the decades? And I think it's a combination of both bad decisions, bad business, and you lose your moral compass.
So the moral compass, I mean, that's plagued Hollywood for years. I mean, you even go back to like Charlie Chaplin. I mean, he was he was he did amazing work. There was a lot of stuff that he did, but in reality he was a morally despicable human being. I mean, there was a whole lot that he did that had no moral compass involved in it at all.
Yeah.
So again, it's not like this is a new thing for Hollywood. I mean, what they did to Hollywood actresses that would get off the bus back in the 50s and 60s. So we see that this is not a new problem, but it does seem like it seems to be unique in this last generation, especially in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Why do you think it's changed so much over this period of time? And why do you think that they seem to want to double down on their lack of moral compass when it comes to what they produce?
Sure. And again, I go back to the little example that what you said at the top about what is good for business and smart business depends on who's running the show. So in Hollywood, it's who's writing the scripts, who's vetting the scripts, who's green lighting the scripts, who's producing it, who's bankrolling it, and who's distributing it. So a lot of folks involved. A lot of folks have to say yes to a film. It's tough to get a film produced and made and distributed. So I would say, gee, when you look at, I'd bring up Cecil B. DeMille. I mean, back in 1927, he made a masterpiece of King of Kings. In 1956, he made the Ten Commandments. 1949, he made Samson and Delilah. These were all phenomenally successful films. The Ten Commandments is still, when you adjust for inflation, it's one of the top 10 all-time grossing films ever. So you'd think, well, then Hollywood would say, let's make more of that. But the folks that run it preferred to make films that either mocked Christianity or got obsessed with two things: Catholicism and priests that abuse little kids, or little girls that get possessed by demons and do terrible things with crosses. And they just said, that's lurid. That makes for a different audience. And we make a lot of money with those films. I mean, then when the studios broke down and we went indie, you had a lot of people that were chomping at the bit to tell their own perspective. And they chose stories that they felt reflected what they believed were the times. And it was more gray. It wasn't good versus evil. It wasn't heartwarming stories. It was more lurid and horrific, and Vietnam War or The Graduate, or again, like you said, the loose morals, the lack of moral compass, and they were making money. So it was hard if somebody came along and said, hey, I know you're making money with these films, but there's an audience out there for something that's more faith-based and something that has an uplifting message. Those got shot down. Those didn't even make it through the first pile of scripts they wanted to look at with a lot of the decision makers. But we see here and there, again, evidence that there are, of course, an audience out there and money to be made, whether it was The Last Passion or The Passion of Christ, Mel Gibson, whether it was the TV series, Roma Downey, Touched by an Angel. And then we had about 2014, I think, a nice shift again, right, with the diffusion of film. And you started to see Miracles Can Happen and I Can Only Imagine and God Is Not Dead, and films that were really made inexpensively, but did really good at the box office. So I think they signaled to Hollywood, there's a business model out there that can be successful for the kinds of films we're talking about. And then I would say things like the Chosen franchise is a nice counter to the fact that if you're going to do something about religion and Christ, you don't have to go Da Vinci Code and start discussing Jesus marrying Mary Magdalene.
Right.
You can be pure and you can just simply present the greatest stories and story ever told, and you will find an audience and a business model that works. So maybe not a sea change. I was going to say Red Sea change, but I'll stick to just sea change. But maybe not a sea change in Hollywood, but enough happening that's positive. I think, again, this is more sustained success than it is these one and offs that we've seen over the last 50, 60 years.
I want to posit what I think and see if you agree with this. Is it possible that Hollywood has been so successful at influencing culture, not reflecting culture, but influencing culture through loose morals, etc. And then when you've had all of these indie films and people have options, that they still think they actually have levels of influence that they don't anymore, but they're not willing to give up what they think they have control and power over the culture itself. Do you think that is do you think I'm correct, or at least on the right path in analyzing the way we're looking at Hollywood and why they do what they do?
Yes, the short answer is absolutely. I think you are on the right track. I would say, I would add to it again that the changes in how we consume what we call film make it so that no one studio, no trio of studios, no one group of like-minded folks, let's say they're very anti-faith or anti-Christian, they cannot dominate the market like they once could. So you're still going to have the superhero stuff, right? That's
Right.
just such a huge audience. And even though there's a little bit of superhero fatigue, instead of making films about the true hero of Christ, you're going to see a lot of the superhero stuff still. I get that. We all get that. But on the other hand, you can't completely monopolize the market like you could. So again, there are filmmakers, producers, studios that are now in existence that weren't a few years ago that are explicitly saying, I want scripts about faith. I want uplifting scripts. I want to produce films about this. This is different in Hollywood, that before you had to fight so much to get that script up to the top from the pile, that it was, again, if it made it, it was done, and then it was back to what we standard, produce out of Hollywood. So there's still lots of players in Hollywood that have no desire to do faith-based. they to your point, they think they can influence culture. They think they can maybe even control culture, but the dollars and cents are starting to come back so clear that they're going to kind of come to a point of reckoning, which is, do we keep on the path we are and literally get passed by, or do we make some changes and realize our audience? We keep talking about diversity. Let's realize our audience is diverse, and they don't want the same stuff that we keep trying to churn and lecture to them time after time. And again, I think films like what we've seen this past weekend, I mean, it's kind of ironic, right? A working man versus a woke Snow White and the Chosen franchise. When you look at those films, what it cost and what they're doing, things like The Chosen and other faith-based films are jumping ahead. And streaming services too are picking up on the fact there's an audience that doesn't want to go to the theaters. They don't want to pay 10, 15, 18 bucks a pop. They want to stay home. But you can't ignore that audience on demand.
Right. So now I guess, is it possible for there to be a morally neutral film that can be made? Is that even possible, or is there always going to be is always got to lean somewhere on the scale, in a level of morality? I can't think of anything that I can point to and be like, oh well, there's this scene, but maybe the theme overall could be morally neutral, like the Avengers, like probably the Working Man, which I haven't seen, where it's just kind of action. But then you're like, oh well, they kill, they kill 30 people in one scene. Is that really
Right,
morally neutral?
right.
So is it possible, do you think, that they can have morally neutral films?
I think they can certainly have films because they have in the past that raised issues and questions from different groups and beliefs, but the film itself didn't take a definitive stand. So it raised questions and got people talking about issues like, is there some being? Is there a God? Is there some greater than us? And if so, what does it mean? Or if we're talking about space exploration, what, if anything, does that do to a belief system and structure we have in place here on Terra Earth? Certainly, I think there are ways to do that. If it's a quality film, compelling storytelling, I think you can raise it where you leave your audience something to digest and talk about. To me, those are always the most exciting films, even in what we do, our documentary films, and now moving more into narrative feature films. I don't want to come over through the screen and knock somebody on the head with a lecture, or tell them, hey, this is what you need to think, or make my characters so overt that you almost feel like, oh, okay, this is a message for whatever it may be: transgenderism, lesbian, gay, somebody who takes law into their own hands and kills 30 people. Well, I prefer, and I think there is a place to make films that tell a really compelling story, but treat people as adults. What do we find when we treat people as adults in the marketplace? We get surprised, at least Hollywood does, that people like to think and they like to be entertained, but they do like to come to conclusions themselves, whatever those may be. The more I think we treat people as adults and let them do what they may with it, as opposed to us trying to say, we're going to try to tell you exactly how to think, I think it will be more successful. And I think we're getting there. I hope, Peter. I think we're getting there.
So let's shift to the response, because again, there's obvious things of, hey, I just should never even turn this movie on. 50 Shades of Grey. I mean, that would be a good example. Like when it came out and that whole franchise, I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. And I don't even think I was a Christian when it first came out. Like I think this is, even then I was like, no, this is not me. So there's certain examples like that. But where do we
Right.
kind of fall when you have a situation where there is well, like even the Snow White, it's like, okay, we're going to change it a little bit, and we're going to, have the openly trans dwarf in the middle of it, or we're going to have like these very strong characters that are unnecessary, or a very sex scene that is completely unnecessary to the story, that's a little graphic, that goes on as long as you can get the R-rated thing and not move over to the next level up.
Right.
Where does our role as Christians where do we stand in saying where should we avoid and not avoid without closing our eyes to what's going on around us and what's happening in culture?
Again, I think that one, I think we have to, and I think everyone, including Christians that are people of faith and want family friendly, but they want a variety. People I've talked to too, they want to, like anyone else, they want a variety of options to some degree. Um, I think we have to stop thinking of Hollywood though as this unified monolithic industry. It is not that way anymore.
Right.
Um, there are new Hollywood locations within the US. For example, state of Georgia is incredibly film friendly. But how did Disney respond to that? Well, at one point, because of the heartbeat law in Georgia and
That's right.
legislation, they basically said, we're never going to work in Georgia again, and we're not going to let our actors, and we're going to pull projects. That's the kind of myopic, short-sighted, sort of politically driven decision that, as you, again, we were talking earlier, is just bad business. You're letting something that Sam Goldwyn used to say, you never let anything else determine business but business. So don't pull a lot of stuff that's going to make you decide and make decisions that, again, are not going to get a good quality product to people and what they want. So as Christians, I'd say do some research. Look into the films. There's a lot of online good places, a lot of good reviews, organizations that kind of filter through and say, hey, this is about this film. This is what's friendly. This is what's not. This is what might be offensive. Again, I think it's getting more balanced even from that perspective. Like, okay, we're looking at these films. Yeah, there's some of what we expected, but it's worth a shot because. So I think as consumers, you want to arm yourself with more knowledge and facts. Just don't go to stuff. Don't go to stuff that really is offensive. Again, enough filmmakers, they do follow surveys, they do focus groups, they do research. One of the things they've found, for example, is that the generation now between 18 and 25, they don't want to see a lot of sex on film. They don't want to see that gratuitous stuff. Movies like 50 Shades of Grey does not appeal to them whatsoever. And so when you peel back some of the layers, you start to see they want different stories. They don't want just the same stuff that you churn out. So again, Christians, do your research, look at these films, but don't feel obliged to go to films just because they're hyped. If it offends you or you don't like it, there are other options. There are other options. And the more you support those other options, the more Hollywood writ large will be able to go back to the folks that bankroll this stuff and make the decisions and go, look at what it was made for. Look at what it's making. Look at the viewership. Look at our subscribers on streaming. It's working. You should bankroll and support more franchises that are faith-based and less of this other crazy stuff, or keep the crazy stuff, but know that you're probably going to lose money.
Right. So looking at the history of film, there's obviously you see it kind of ebb and flow. You see like sections of like during generations where it's just like almost the same type of film. You go to the 80s and you have like that action films were almost identical. It just depending on whether it was Chuck Norris, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Stallone. I mean, they were all basically the same type of film during that point in time. And then you kind of move a little bit to like the Mel Gibson, Bruce Willis type of action. Do you see this being based off of what you're saying with people going to other areas? Do you see this just kind of being a trend that'll eventually fizzle out? And how long do you think this would last if we do our part in just saying, look, we're going to support good films, not even boycott bad ones, but just support good ones? How long do you think this will last, do you think?
Oh, I think that if you do that, it's sustainable. There's no reason why it wouldn't last. It's kind of like just because let's say there's a subgenre film. There are some films that I find from a personal standpoint hideous. From a filmmaker standpoint, I understand that there's a subgenre that loves, for example, torture type horror films, or they love The Hostel, or they love The Saw, right? These
Right.
franchises that you can crank them out, and you've got an audience that if you and I talk in 10 years or 20 years, God willing, you're probably going to be up to like Saw number 25. You know what I mean? And it's like, my goodness, is there anybody left to Saw? Um, but you're going to have a subgenre that a small section that are going to go, this is what I like. And so give me as many of these darn films as I like. That's great. As a filmmaker and writer, though, that doesn't mean I have to do it.
Right.
Because there's another slot that I can go to as a viewer, as a writer, as a filmmaker, and know that the more that people support alternative films that don't slice people up, that, are maybe about real people and real decisions and real dilemmas they face, and they come out stronger because of their faith, as long as people support those, someone in studios are going to pay for those. They're going to bankroll those. They're going to distribute those because, again, ultimately, they want to make the money. And if Saw number 25 keeps making money, they'll keep doing it. It doesn't mean that everybody has to go, gosh, there's no options but Saw and Hostel and things about exorcism. And, now it's 300 Shades of Grey. Doesn't have to be that way, right, Peter? Does not have to be that way because technology and how we get entertainment on demand has changed so much. There's room for everybody. You just got to support the good stuff you like and send clear messages of, we want more of this stuff. We want more shows like this. We want more films like this.
All right. So we're coming to an end. So now here's going to be like the $1,000,000 question for you, though. Top 3 movies of all times. What do you think that is? Now, this obviously, Saul is not going to make the mix of what you think are the top best movies of all time. Like, if you had to put them down, and it's like those movies that you're like, I have to watch, because you have it from a different perspective than I do. I have it from just strictly a consumer perspective. You're looking at it from both a consumer and an artistic perspective as a writer, and you can analyze the cinematography better than I can. All of that. So, what do you think is there? I just want to get your opinion. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I just want to know what you have to say.
It's a fair question. I get asked this. It's one of my most perplexing questions because it's a curse when I watch films. I don't want to say I don't enjoy them. I do. Don't get me wrong. But I'll go through 3, 5, 7 minutes where I'm looking for something and somebody go, what just happened? Like, I'm not sure. I was looking over here at the lighting. I was looking at the framing. Oh my goodness, I love that particular shot. I'll stop films. I was watching a film a couple nights ago. It's an okay film. It's sort of a Hitchcock type inspired suspense film, and I stopped it 20 minutes in. So I just kept going back and forth in this one shot that was glorious. The film itself, it was okay. But if someone asked me, I'd say, well, that's a good film because of that one shot, and then it's in my mind. And now, what was it? Jack Benny said something like he never heard a good joke he didn't want to steal. I've never seen a shot that somehow I don't want to put into what I'm doing. But there's a lot of good movies. I mean, I think Inception and Chris Nolan comes to mind as one of the movies that I've watched probably as a consumer 4 or 5 times, as someone who teaches part-time politics and film, well over a dozen, because it's just intriguing script, the thought, but more how he put it together. Doesn't mean I have to believe any of it.
Right.
It doesn't mean I have to believe it's even possible. But a film like that, I'm drawn to. That makes me think a lot, especially about how it's made and how I feel. I have all kinds of films like that. Some are esoteric, some are more well known. The Third Man with Orson Welles and Joseph Cotten. It's such a great little gem of a film for its time, but also how we're still influenced by some of the scenes now. I mean, I don't know if you've seen or remember, there's an underground scene where Orson Welles is being chased in the sewers underground, and it's great. I mean, how it's shot for that time, especially if you look at any of the chase scenes now we do, everybody's copying that still. My goodness, we're like, what, 70 years later? And everybody's like, I got to get an underground Third Man chase scene or a Ferris wheel. I got to get a Ferris wheel scene in because it was so cool. That's how I look at films, to be honest with you. I pull stuff from.
That's awesome. I love kind of I love the way that you do that, honestly, because I took one film class in college. It was kind of I had to take like some type of arts class, and again, I love movies so much. The fact that I actually did see Ishtar, I was one of the 7 people that saw it, so I mean, you had great actors in it. I don't know like how it
Oh,
could have.
yeah, how could it bomb? That was my classic. I put Ishtar under the one of the things of a huge actor with a huge ego wants to make a movie, and ultimately everybody buckles under the pressure, not because they think it's going to be a success. They just don't want to upset the big star so much they can't use him or her in another project. Warren Beatty, and I think it was Dustin Hoffman in
Dustin Hoffman,
Ishtar.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's like Kevin Costner, Waterworld.
Oh
So many
gosh.
people told
Yeah.
Kevin, please, Kevin, don't force us to make this movie. You're a big star. We know you can force us in the sense of, basically leverage of I won't do these films if you don't do this. But I mean, please, oh my goodness. And it just immediately just the budget steeps, like the water level going down, the budget going up, water level down, audience viewer down. I would even put that in some ways even more of a bigger bomb than Ishtar. You got one in the desert and one in the water. Is there a bomb on a mountaintop? I don't know. But let's just stay away from those flicks. But even bombs, I like bomb movies in some ways just to study why they bomb so much. Is there anything I can pull from them?
Right.
Don't do something about the desert and Hoffman Beatty. And my goodness, there's no way I would do something about like Waterworld. So I got those covered. I'm open to other stuff.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If people want to know more about what you're doing, like how, some of the books or articles you're writing about, where do they find you? How do they find you from there?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Peter. I think the easiest thing is just Greg, a filmmaker, 2 M's, Greg, the filmmaker.com, or they can go to Valmar Films. I'm a co-founder of Valmar Films, VALMAR Films, valmarfilms.com. And we're always open to talk to people. We've got a number of projects we're working on, and we're always open to co-producing and collaboration.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
My
So thank you
pleasure. Thank
again.
you, Peter. I appreciate what you do.